Welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview. Newcastle welcome Aston Villa up to St James's Park on Sunday. I'm Andrew Musgrove and I'm joined by John Gibson. Gibbo, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? You well?
I'm a lot better than I was, Andrew, yes. And I'm getting a bit used to being on that seesaw, so up and down. But I'm a lot better after the Champions League.
Yes, a fantastic win over PSV 3-0. You can go over and watch the Monday show on a Thursday with me and Mark for a bit of an in-depth chat about that game and performance. But John, just give us your thoughts on it.
Yeah, a very, very positive result. Just the result we wanted. Clean sheet, scored 3 goals. All 3 forwards scored, so they are all pluses. And, to some people, it might surprise some people, but quite frankly, with the format it is now, the Champions League is a lot easier than the Premier League. And I think that's been found out with Newcastle's games with Bilbao and Benfica and Union and PSV. They are easier games than you have in the Premier League. Of course, there's exceptions. One of the exceptions is going to come up next game with Paris Saint-Germain. But because there's so many clubs in the Champions League now, a lot of the games are easier. And let's say straight away, PSV, Aston Villa will be a lot tougher than PSV. So there's a perfect example of what I'm just talking about. We were terrific. We hounded them. But I tell you what, they don't like hounding, do they? They're not used to the physicality of that in the Dutch league. They were devoured by us, just as Union were running away with the Belgian league and we just absolutely slaughtered them. These are running away with the Dutch league and we absolutely slaughtered them. But didn't they give us a great help on the first 2 goals, for which I'm eternally grateful? It didn't take anything away from our performance, but they did give us a great help. They don't like it up them, as they say. If you keep around them and at them, they find it very uncomfortable. And I think the manager hinted at that before the game when he said that, they would be facing a different thing with Newcastle United, with the physicality and the hounding that Newcastle do, and so it proved.
Yeah, it certainly did. And we said, the players had to step up and really show their worth. Good performance by, you would say, the majority, if not everyone that featured. Did they step up, John? Did they do as we asked?
Yeah, they did, but they've got to stop just doing that when they're stung by a bad performance. We seem to have a habit now. If we produce a bad performance, and Wolves was a bad performance, if we produce something like that, we get stung into giving a reaction. But then having given a one-match reaction, we just think, well, we've put the record right, and we just revert to nature these days, not the old days. So yes, they did step up. They did what was asked of them. They were a class above the opposition. Now let's see them do that against Aston Villa, please.
Yes, fingers crossed. Aston Villa play Fenerbahce. They're away in Turkey before they do travel to Tyneside. Will that extra day's rest for Newcastle make any difference, do you think, John?
Yes, I think it will make a difference. No question, they're resting today and they're resting Thursday. Aston Villa aren't. They don't start resting until Friday. It should make a significant difference, and I hope it does. We keep hearing about it. Certainly, the Aston Villa manager, Unai Emery, will be telling us all about it before Sunday, about the advantage Newcastle have got by playing a couple of days earlier in Europe. I think it does make a difference. It certainly gives us a couple of more days with Bruno and any other knocks, which they won't have if they pick up knocks on a Thursday night.
Hopefully, Fenerbahce will give Aston Villa a real test. Just quickly looking at the Europa League table, Villa in 3rd and Fenerbahce down in 12th, but it's just a matter of points really that separate the next phase to the playoff phase and so on. So Fenerbahce at home will be looking to win that game and hopefully will run Villa into the ground. You mentioned that Bruno Guimaraes had to come off before half time on Wednesday. Eddie Howe said it was swelling around the ankle. We don't know how bad it is. There's been no update. Yes, Eddie Howe's press conference is on Friday, but again, we always say, will we get a true and proper answer? If he is missing John, and it's a horrible question to ask, how big of a blow will it be, and who would replace him?
Oh, a big blow, because he's the heartbeat of the side. And I am very concerned because the matches are coming thick and fast. Will he not only be available for Aston Villa, but will he be available for Paris Saint-Germain, which everything now hinges upon for both clubs? So what a match that's going to be. He is the heartbeat of the side. And you know what? When I see him beating the ground, and when I see him indicating to the bench that he's going to have to come off, that is something seriously wrong, because he normally defies any notion of him coming off or being substituted or being given a well-earned rest. He doesn't want it. So that, I mean, my gut feeling, and it's nothing else, is that we won't see him against Aston Villa. Will we see him in Paris? Who replaces him? Miley, without a shadow of doubt. Yes, we will miss him. I mean, Miley it's a better balance to midfield when Miley replaces Tonali with Joe Linton on one side of him and Bruno on the other. But it will be Miley. I think he has got the all-round game ahead of Ramsey and ahead of Willock to get the nod against Villa. And I think he will do, and he will not let us down.
Bruno Guimaraes has taken to social media, taken to Instagram, and he's posted mixed feelings, happy with the team's great performance and the 3 points. I hope the injury isn't too serious and that I can be back on the pitch doing what I love most as soon as possible. I mean, look, you can interpret that in any way you want, but obviously, I guess in the aftermath of coming off and the emotion, he will be feeling a bit sore. He'll be feeling a bit maybe upset, and I wouldn't read too much into that. We'll wait for the medical reports to come back.
It doesn't tell us anything, Andrew, really. It's a natural sort of reaction, leaving the door open, hope I'm not out too long. That could be a couple of days and he plays against Villa, or it could be a couple of weeks. We don't know, and neither does he. He'll find out in the next few hours, I guess, or in the next 24 hours. But yes, he's going to be a miss. And of course, we can't stand injuries at the moment because we've got all the injuries at the back. And, we've got to have as many people, because after Villa, we've got all these away games and huge games. So by Jove, we want the biggest squad we can possibly have for those.
And it's not just about losing what Bruno obviously brings on the pitch, 7 goals, 2 assists in the Premier League. There's that mental kind of obstacle Newcastle face when Bruno's not in the side, and they just don't tend to win. And obviously we would like to see that record rubbed from the history books, but it's always concern, isn't it? Even when he's just rested, and that happened obviously against Bournemouth this season. Newcastle just look at a totally different side. We saw against Spurs when he was rested and then he came off the bench and he totally changed the game in terms of what Newcastle were doing. There was a bit more drive and a bit more purpose. I mean, obviously, they've got to get over it at some point. If he's missing on Sunday, then can Miley be the man to lead Newcastle United past that record?
It's putting an awful lot on young shoulders, and he needs an awful lot of help from the other 10 who happen to be on the pitch with him. But he's a decent old substitute for the captain, isn't he? But the captain, I mean, he's producing so many goals this season, so many assists. He's playing further forward. He can pick a pass that other players don't see. And that is the difference with the guy. He can see a pass that nobody else sees on the Newcastle side. And I include Tonali in that, in his current form. And so it's no reflection on Louis at all, but he's going to be a huge miss. We're lucky to have somebody like Louis that can go in and play for him, but of course he's going to be a huge miss if he is missing. And I suspect he probably will be.
Hopefully, if he is missing, that blow is softened by the fact that Newcastle United have started to get leaders back into the starting 11. I'm looking at Kieran Trippier. I'm looking at Joe Linton. On yesterday's episode, I was, praising the vocal aspect of both those players. I think that's really key. Obviously, you miss Bruno, you miss his ability to pick a pass, as you say, John, that drive to take Newcastle United forward, that passion that he has. But that leadership that he also has, he's not maybe as vocal as those two I've mentioned there, but he's a great captain. But hopefully, if he is missing, those two, potentially Sandro Tonali, they can step up and just maybe fill a bit of that void that will be there if indeed he's injured.
Absolutely. I mean, Joe Linton is all the worries we had about Joe Linton to a certain extent have been blown away now, because he's gone back to the form that we love and to being the big beast that we love. And my hope as well, and we don't know until Aston Villa play on Thursday night what the composition of their side's going to be like on Sunday. But they were when they lost at home to Everton, they were decimated in midfield. Two of the three midfielders were already out, and McGinn got injured, the skipper, after just about a quarter of an hour. So they were decimated in their midfield. And certainly a couple of those guys aren't going to be available Thursday and probably not Sunday. So if we have our big beast missing in midfield, maybe they'll have a couple of theirs, and that leaving things out in that middle of the park, because both sides have in the past produced a lot of success through their midfield, both Villa and ourselves. So perhaps anything about Bruno missing will be sort of balanced by who's in the Villa midfield, or more importantly, who's not.
Yeah, Kamara and McGinn ruled out according to premierinjuries.com, and Martinez has a 50% chance of featuring. So yeah, some big absentees for Aston Villa, and as we say, they've still got to play that game over in Turkey as well. A quick word on Jacob Ramsey, obviously facing his old side, John. In recent weeks, we look like we're starting to see maybe the player Newcastle United thought they bought, and the player, to be fair, that most Aston Villa fans were sad to see leave Villa Park. I don't expect them to start on Sunday. I think he'd probably one of the first options maybe to come off the bench. Could he impact the game in any way?
I hope so. We need him too, for our sake and for his sake, because big money was paid for him. And, perhaps we're just seeing the first shoots of the summer signings, perhaps justifying the outlay that there was, because Ramsey is beginning to look as if he might do something. Wissa will have received huge confidence by scoring on his Champions League first start of his whole career and getting an assist out of it. He'd only scored 2 goals in 12 appearances before PSV, so he looks better. And Elanga, the crowd are trying to lift him now, and isn't that lovely? The fans give him chanting his name and trying to play their part in lifting the lad. And it's only early days. Elanga's got a lot to do yet. Ramsey's got less than Elanga to do, but something to do. And Wissa's not quite there. One swallow doesn't make a summer, but there's good signs, particularly with Wissa. So perhaps we're beginning to see signs that we're going to get something out of a tune out of these guys in the second half of the season.
Fingers crossed. Just a reminder, ladies and gents, this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. You can click the link in the podcast description box to get a discount offer on your plan. There's no risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. One subscription can be used across 10 devices, and it's perfect if you're browsing on public Wi-Fi, whether that be the train, the bus, a cafe, or a restaurant. Having NordVPN on your devices just offers that added extra element of security against the potential scammers and hackers lurking in the shadows. So do click the link and take advantage of an exclusive discount on your NordVPN plan. In terms, John, of the starting 11, I think obviously Nick Pope will be in goal. Eddie Howe pretty much suggested Kieran Trippier would be at right back, because he talked about wanting to protect them. So that's why he came off with 5 or 6 minutes to go on Wednesday. The centre-back pairing, which looked comfortable against PSV without being tested too much, will be Chow and Botman. Lewis Hall, who was excellent again on Wednesday, will be at left back. Then into midfield, as we mentioned, if Bruno's out, then it will, we think, be Miley alongside Tonali and Joe Linton. Onto the wings, it's going to be Gordon and Barnes, because both scored against PSV. So why would you change what you would think and assume would be a good feeling amongst those two? And then up top may come down to fitness, because I think everybody would suggest it would have to be Wissa, but he put in quite the shift against PSV, plenty of running, chasing, closing down. And I suppose it's just that little bit of doubt to whether he can handle another game in such a quick turnaround.
Yeah, that's the one thing where a decision will be made. And Newcastle are that much better with Wissa playing as a 9 than Voldemort playing as a 9, because he isn't one. But, you know, every game's a big game, but Paris Saint-Germain is something extra special. The winners of that game, if there are winners, will automatically be in the final 16. So it's a big game. Does he keep Wissa for that and say Wissa can't play 3 games in a week? So does he play at least start? I mean, whoever starts will be substituted later in the game against Villa. Does he start with Voldemort and keep Wissa for Paris? If it was a matter of just selecting a one-off team, you would play Wissa without any shadow of doubt. But do you feel he can do it again and then still go for you in a match as crucial as Paris? Or do you keep him for Paris and start Voldemort? And I've got a suspicion that he might do that.
Yes, let us know in the comments what you think will happen on Sunday when it comes to the team news. And as John has said there, it's absolutely brilliant to see Yohan Wissa showing a little bit about himself, and hopefully he continues to do that. Newcastle are unbeaten in their last 17 home league games against Aston Villa, winning 11 and drawing 6. And Newcastle are unbeaten in their last 8 home Premier League matches, and of course are unbeaten in the last 4 in the Premier League as well. We've started to turn a corner, John, would you say, in the last month or so? And it's all about, though, that next result and continuing to take the good feeling and turn it into wins, because ultimately they didn't do that against Wolves. There will be a good feeling around the camp because of what happened against PSV, but that needs to follow into Sunday, and we need to come out with a victory.
Yeah, I'm always cautious about Newcastle turning corners this particular season, because we seem to turn a corner and find ourselves in a cul-de-sac, don't we? Instead of being on the highway, we're in a cul-de-sac. And I mean, yes, I can understand where that question comes from with some of the results we've got. But have we turned a corner? We lost at home to Manchester City badly and virtually sacrificed the Carabao Cup. And we went to Wolves and were awful. So, I mean, have we turned? Let's put a few more good performances and results together before we start talking about corners and stop talking about cul-de-sacs. I would like to think that we have, but I also remember, and perhaps it's the old head on me, I say, the old Geordie caution because of past misdemeanors. But after we play Villa, we're playing 6 out of 7 away from home or something. Let's talk about turning the corner when we get some results out of those away games, shall we?
Yep, I hold you to that. The league table is extremely close, and despite 2 points dropped against Wolves, Newcastle United remain only 3 points off Liverpool, who sit 4th, and only 2 points off Manchester United, who sit in 5th. And I guess that's what it comes down to, isn't it, John? That league table is so tight that you can't afford to have an off weekend, because you lose and suddenly you find yourself.
Having dropped 2 points at Wolves that we ought to have got, in terms of that was a must-win match, having lost 2 points against Wolves, and knowing what's coming away from home in the immediate future, which includes, in all competitions, it includes the return with Man City, it includes Liverpool, it includes Aston Villa in the Cup, etc., etc. We've got to win this one, really, because we need a bit of a cushion. We need those 3 points. If we drop 2 points, or heaven forbid 3 points on Sunday, then with what's immediately to come, it's a tough old journey. It really is. And this is an interesting game with Villa on Sunday, because 20 days later we'll play them again at their place in the FA Cup. So they're going to have a big say on how our season pans out.
Yeah, certainly so. Valentine's Day, that one. So I'm sure a lot of you will be heading down to Villa Park with a Valentine's card or two. Just looking at the table in terms of the teams below Newcastle United, you go down to 12th, John, and Brighton are on 30 points. Newcastle have 33 points. Like, it's such a bizarre season because you lose a game and others around you win. Suddenly you go from being or looking up to look out of the picture, but then in reality, you're still only a win away from being back in the picture. It's absolutely mental, and that must be hard mentally, maybe on Eddie Howe and the players to kind of not have that respite, if you will, not to have that cushion. I mean, Aston Villa obviously got a little bit of a cushion. They're on 43 points. It's a big drop down to fourth and fifth, but to having to be, it's relentless is essentially the point I'm trying to make.
Yes, it is. But I mean, that's what life in the rarefied air is. If you want to be successful, that's what you face. It is a peculiar Premier League because Manchester City is an example. At the back end of last year, we're just winning upon winning upon winning upon winning and really putting pressure on Arsenal. And then I think since the turn of the year, the only game they've won was the one up here. I think they've had about 3 draws and then a couple of defeats, and that shock defeat in Norway. So they've struggled. I mean, as champions, Arne Slot has been under pressure, hasn't he? That his team's been very inconsistent this year, nothing like the team they were, etc., etc. So even the teams above us have. It's a funny old Premier League season. Everybody seems to be tripping over their bootlaces, apart from Arsenal, and they've got a couple of draws in the league when they were expected to have wins and were accused of perhaps being overcautious. What we've got, we'll hold rather than go and win matches. So it is a peculiar old league, and isn't it funny? You've got to decide what your priorities are. What's our priorities? We've got the Premier League. We've got the Champions League. That must be a priority to go to Paris Saint-Germain and get something. We've got a heck of a thing on in the Carabao Cup, but do we want to, in case we go out of that, do we want to do well in the FA Cup, which means winning at Villa? Because there's no replays one way or another, even if it's on penalties. We've got to win at Villa. So, it's what Newcastle face is season defining, because at the moment we either go out of the Carabao Cup, go out of the FA Cup, and have only the Champions League only and the Premier League, or even don't do. We could go out the Champions League if we lose at Paris Saint-Germain and then lose in the 2-leg playoff. Heaven forbid. Now I would think we would be seeded in the 2-leg playoff and therefore have a very good chance of going through. But it's the next month is very defining on what happens. At the moment we're in 4 competitions. We could end up in 2, or heaven forbid, even 1.
You've said there, it's a must win. We must win this game, given
yes.
how tight it is in the league table. So will that be the message that Eddie Howe's delivering to the players? Because the point I was trying to make before, maybe I didn't articulate it in the best way, is that sometimes, managers will always say, we're going there to win. Whoever's coming to St James's Park, we're going to beat them. That's the end. But let's be honest, John, we've been around this game long enough to know that sometimes you may plan for a point here or there, or a point wouldn't be the worst result. But again, looking at how close everyone is in that table for those European spots, you can't plan for a point. You have to have 3, because you could be sitting 6th by the start of the weekend, and by the end of it, down in 12th. That's how close it is. So do you think the message will be, and at St James's Park, it will always tend to be, we're going to go out there to win, but will it be, we must win this because of our European ambitions?
Well, yes, it ought to be, and I think it will be. That'll be Eddie's message, whether it's taken in by the players privately, each individual or not, it's a different kettle of fish. We sacrificed 2 points at Wolves, which has put pressure on Aston Villa. We could have drawn with Aston Villa if we'd won at Wolves. But now we only got a point at Wolves. We need to beat Aston Villa. But will certain players' minds be on Paris? That's what we don't know. I hope not, because believe you me, if we don't get something against Villa and lose in Paris, and any side can lose against Paris Saint-Germain in the French capital, I'm not saying by any means we will, but it's always possible. Then with the games that are immediately following that, we've got a totally new complexion on the thing. And it's ironic, isn't it? We're talking about we need to beat Villa in the league, so we'll qualify for Europe, so that we qualify for the Champions League, which we're already in. So where does that fit in with Paris, and how important is Paris? The simple answer is right now, every game's important. And Eddie's famous phrase, we take every game as it comes, has got to be right at the moment. They've got to do that, and they've got to give it everything. It is hard, and it is very tempting for certain players to say, let's go out and do the business against Villa. And if it works, it works. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. But the real crunch is Paris Saint-Germain on Wednesday. It would be very tempting for one or two players to do that. There'll be some people that say that Anthony Gordon, bless him, has done that all season. He's dynamite in the Champions League. He scores goals in the Champions League for peace. He's been mentioned in the same breath as Alan Shearer for goal scoring, for goodness sake. Can you believe that? Anthony Gordon in the same breath as Alan Shearer, but because of Champions League goals, that's been mentioned. Yet in the Premier League, when did he score an open play? When did he last score an open play? Will you please, Anthony, do what you do in the Champions League against Aston Villa on Sunday? We would be ever so grateful if you would. And we would like him to do that. And, it's easy to get up for the Champions League, I think, because it is called the Champions League. And let's be truthful, the teams we've played have been easier to play with, I'll say it again, easier to play against than in the Premier League. And certainly it was easier to play against PSV than it is against Aston Villa. Of course, Paris Saint-Germain will be different on Wednesday because they're one of the big hitters like Barcelona. But as a main, it's been easier. But it still carries that wonderful charisma, the label, doesn't it? The Champions League. That is the pinnacle. That's what everybody wants. That's why we say come to Newcastle. So it carries that in really the Premier League's bread and butter in comparison. But we can't afford to look at it that way. We need a win on Sunday. All hasn't been wiped out just because we got a result against PSV after Wolves. Let's go and do it again on Sunday. It's important. It'll be harder. It'll be closer. They won't gift us goals the way we were gifted goals on Wednesday night.
No, it's going to be tough. Obviously, they had that amazing run, which they shot up the league. I think it was 11 wins on the bounce or something like that. But in recent weeks, they've drawn to Palace and they've lost to Everton. So not the daunting task it was a few weeks back. They're missing key players, as John mentioned. Still got some really talented players. Obviously, the manager is an absolute delight as well to have in the Premier League. But they don't like coming to St James's Park. And I'm going to back Newcastle United to win this. I still feel like there's going to be a game when it clicks, and it has happened previously where it does click against Aston Villa, and you remember the 6-1 many years ago. But we have thumped them a few times, and they've done the same to us as well. It seems to be a bit back and forth. They're going to win, and I'm just kind of deciding whether I go with my heart or my head. And my heart says it's going to be by quite a few goals. My head says it'll be a scrappy 1-0 win. To be truthful, John, I don't really care as long as they pick up the 3 points. And over to you.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same as you do. I think we'll win. And I think we've got to win. I'm not expecting it to be where we canter to a 3-0 like the other night, or a 4-0 or a 4-1 or a 5-1. I think we'll win by a single goal margin, whether that's 1-0 or 2-1. But really, we say it doesn't matter. Goal difference does matter in the Premier League. But I'd settle. If somebody said now, Newcastle will win, but we're not going to tell you the score, I'd have settled for that and say, I'll take that. It doesn't matter what the score is. I just want the 3 points. I think, like you, that we'll win, but I think it'll be tight. I don't see we really tucking them up hugely. And I think it'll be by a single goal margin.
Well, there we have it. A win is a win. And in the context, again, with how tight the table is, it's the most important thing on Sunday. Big thanks to John for popping on and providing the match preview ahead of the trip of Aston Villa to St James's Park. Look out for the view from the opposition later in the week with Mark and Dan Rowlandson from the Claret and Blue podcast, where Dan will be hopefully providing the secrets to beating Aston Villa. I know it's a game that he particularly dreads, especially up here on Tyneside, because, as I say, the record is dreadful. It's also the Musgrove family derby between me and my in-laws, so it's always a fun time. This game certainly is. So I'm looking forward to it. Fingers crossed it's 3 points, and me and John will see you very soon.